For over 40 years, there's been this undeclared war raging in the Middle East. It's a complex, shadowy conflict between Iran on one side and the United States and Israel on the other. It's a fight that has totally reshaped the modern world, and if it ever truly breaks out into the open, it could set the entire globe on fire. So, how on earth did we get here? Well, to figure that out, we have to go all the way back to the beginning.
This quote, it really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? This isn't your typical war with front lines and formal declarations. Oh no, this is a shadow war, fought through proxies, through assassinations, and with crippling economic sanctions. It's a story fueled by decades of resentment and some seriously cold-blooded strategic moves. So let's pull back the curtain and see how it all started.
Okay, so here's the thing that's going to sound absolutely crazy from today's perspective. The place where this whole story starts. Before this massive conflict ignited, these three nations, Iran, the US, and Israel, weren't enemies, not even close. They were actually strategic partners.
Just look at this table. It shows you how completely everything was turned on its head. Before 1979, you had the Shah's Iran, a very pro-Western monarchy. The US saw him as this crucial wall against the Soviet Union. And for Israel, surrounded by hostile Arab states, Iran was a lifeline. They had deep economic ties and even secret military partnerships.
I mean, listen to this quote from an Israeli military attaché who was actually there. It perfectly captures how shocking this whole reversal was. But here's the problem. Both Washington and Tel Aviv were completely blind. They were only dealing with the Shah and his inner circle, and they had no idea about the anger that was boiling up among the Iranian people, who saw the monarchy as corrupt, brutal, and basically a puppet for the West.
And yeah, that blindness had massive consequences. In 1978, all that simmering anger just exploded. Ayatollah Khomeini came back from 15 years in exile and somehow managed to unite everyone, nationalists, leftists, religious groups, all against the Shah. And in just 10 days, it was over. The Shah's rule was gone. Khomeini created a new Islamic republic, and with it, a brand new identity for Iran, one that was fundamentally against its old friends.
444 days. That number is just burned into the American psyche. For that long, 52 American diplomats were held hostage in their own embassy. And when Khomeini publicly backed the student captors, it was more than just a political move. It was the final act that completely shattered the US-Iran relationship, creating a chasm of mistrust that, honestly, is still there today.
So after the hostage crisis, a direct war was off the table, but Iran wasn't about to back down. So the battleground shifted. They couldn't fight the US or Israel head-on, so they came up with a new strategy, one that would define this conflict for decades: proxy warfare. And the very first test run for this new playbook, the war-torn nation of Lebanon.
So check out how this unfolded. In 1982, Israel invades Lebanon to get rid of the PLO. But by getting rid of one enemy, they accidentally created a power vacuum. Iran saw this opening and seized it. They sent their elite Revolutionary Guards in, not to fight directly, but to organize, train, and bankroll a new resistance group from Lebanon's Shiite community. And that group would become Hezbollah, the Party of God. And with Hezbollah came this terrifying new tactic, the martyrdom operation, the suicide bombing. The idea of the Shahid, or martyr, was deep in Shiite history, but they weaponized it for the modern era. In November 1982, an 18-year-old named Ahmed Kassir drove a car bomb into the Israeli military headquarters in Tyre. It was an act that would change the rules of the game forever.
And then, not even a year later, they used that same tactic against the multinational peacekeeping force in Beirut. Two massive, coordinated suicide bombings hit the barracks of the U.S. Marines and French paratroopers. This attack, linked directly back to the new Hezbollah with Iranian support, was a brutal, brutal message. There was a new player on the field, and America was now a target.
So the rise of Hezbollah completely changed the game. But what happened next, it's honestly just a tragedy. The 90s and 2000s became this long, painful period of missed chances and epic miscalculations, building what you can only really call an axis of mistrust.
Picture this. It's 1991. The first Gulf War is over, and the U.S. is on top of the world. They put together this huge peace conference in Madrid. They invite everybody, Europeans, Soviets, Arab leaders. But one country was very pointedly not invited: Iran. For the leaders in Tehran, the message was crystal clear: you are not welcome here. It was a signal that the U.S. planned on keeping them isolated forever.
But then, something really weird happens. After the 9/11 attacks, the US and Iran suddenly had a common enemy, the Taliban in Afghanistan. The Taliban, a Sunni group, had been brutal to Afghanistan's Shiite minority and had even killed Iranian diplomats. So, in 2001, Iran actually helped the U.S., providing intelligence to topple the regime. For a split second, it looked like, just maybe, things could change.
And then, bam! Just a few months after they worked together, President Bush gives his famous Axis of Evil speech. By lumping Iran in with Iraq and North Korea, it completely obliterated any goodwill that had been built. In Tehran, it wasn't just seen as an insult. It was a direct threat that confirmed all their worst fears about what America really wanted.
Now, this next part of the story is just mind-blowing. Only a year later, Iran made one last desperate attempt at diplomacy. With the U.S. now in Iraq, Tehran sent a fax to Washington. And it was basically a grand bargain. They offered to put everything on the table, Hezbollah, Hamas, their nuclear program, everything, in exchange for security guarantees and an end to sanctions.
And what did Washington do? Nothing. Crickets. The offer was just dismissed. This was at the height of American hubris, right after the quick invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq. The thinking in D.C. was basically, we're on top of the world, we don't need to talk to them. For Iran, that was it. That was the last straw. The consensus became, the U.S. can't be trusted and diplomacy is a waste of time.
And that rejection, that single moment, really pushed this whole conflict into its most dangerous phase yet. If Iran couldn't get security through diplomacy, well, it was going to find another way to guarantee its survival. And that leads us directly to the nuclear showdown.
You really have to try and see it from their perspective. The logic was simple and pretty stark. They'd been labeled evil. They had just watched the United States invade two of their neighbors. So the leadership decided that the only thing that could guarantee the regime's survival from a U.S. attack was to have a nuclear capability. It was the ultimate insurance policy.
But hold on, the story of diplomacy wasn't totally over. President Obama came into office wanting to prevent an Iranian bomb, but also to prevent another war. After years of super-secret talks and tough negotiations, they actually pulled it off. In 2015, they signed the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA. Iran agreed to gut its nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief.
But not everyone was celebrating. The opposition was fierce, and nobody was louder than Israel. In a pretty shocking move, Prime Minister Netanyahu went and addressed the U.S. Congress to argue against the deal. His argument was basically, this deal doesn't stop Iran. It just pauses them. And all that money they get from sanctions relief is just going to go straight to their proxies, like Hezbollah.
And in the end, that argument won out in Washington. In May 2018, President Donald Trump pulled the U.S. out of the nuclear deal, calling it the worst deal ever. And just like that, with the stroke of a pen, years of painstaking diplomacy, gone. The world was right back at square one, in a tense standoff with Iran's nuclear program running free again.
So when you step back and look at the last 40 years, what do you see? You see this constant state of conflict without any actual declaration of war. You see a tragic story of missed opportunities, where any chance for real dialogue was killed by this incredibly deep mistrust. For Israel, Iran is still an existential threat. And for everyone involved, this deadly cycle of confrontation has just become normal. And that brings us right back to today and the big, final question. After 4 decades of this, of the hostility, the failed deals, the proxy wars, is it even possible to break this cycle? That is the 40-year question. And the answer? Well, it's still hanging in the balance. Not just for the Middle East, but for all of us.